At first, everything felt like a dream. I had married Julia, an intelligent, beautiful woman who seemed to light up every room she entered. I thought we had everything anyone could ever want, a happy home, an exciting life in the city, and love that seemed untouchable by time. We were a perfect couple, the envy of our friends and even strangers who looked at us with admiration. Then there was my brother, Ethan. He was the complete opposite of me in many ways. Where I was content with a steady job in tech, Ethan thrived in the high-stakes world of finance. He was older than me by 7 years, and over the years, he had built an empire for himself. Tall, charismatic, and with a sharp mind for business, Ethan never had to work too hard to make people like him. He could buy his way into anything, and his wealth often gave him an aura of power that made people want to be around him. But despite his success, there was always a gap between us. I often felt like the lesser sibling, the one who had to work harder for everything I achieved. There was a constant comparison in the back of my mind, even though Ethan was always kind, generous, and seemingly nonchalant about it all. He was a loving brother, and I never thought anything could break the bond we shared. However, it was in the quiet moments, those rare instances when you think everything is going right, that the cracks began to appear. It started innocently enough. Ethan and Julia would chat about business, or politics, or even the weather. It was the kind of light-hearted conversation that could easily be dismissed, but over time, I noticed something odd. The way Julia laughed at Ethan's jokes seemed more genuine than the ones she shared with me. She would glance at him with an almost unreadable expression, something that lingered just a moment too long before she would quickly avert her gaze. It wasn't blatant, nothing to raise an alarm yet, but it was there, this strange chemistry between them that I couldn't quite explain. I brushed it off at first. After all, Ethan was my brother. He would never do anything to hurt me, and Julia. Julia loved me. She had to. Why else would we have built this life together? But then things started to change. I would come home from work and find Julia distracted, lost in thought, or even absent when I arrived. Sometimes, she'd be texting, and when I asked who she was talking to, she would hesitate, offering vague responses. I started to wonder if I was overreacting, but the unease in my chest only grew. It was a feeling that I couldn't shake, like the undercurrent of a storm, faint but growing stronger with every passing day. One night, I arrived home early, hoping to surprise Julia with dinner. As I stepped into the hallway, I heard the faint sound of laughter, soft, intimate laughter. It came from the living room, where I was certain Julia and I had been alone when I left for work earlier that morning. But now, the space was different. The warmth of it, the feeling of home, seemed tainted, replaced by a strange tension I couldn't quite place. As I walked closer, the door was slightly ajar. I froze. The sight that greeted me was one I'd never forget. Ethan and Julia were sitting on the couch together, their faces inches apart. She was smiling, genuinely, her eyes bright, and he was leaning toward her with an intensity that made my heart stop. I felt my stomach churn, the blood draining from my face. It wasn't just the physical closeness. It was the way they were looking at each other, the way they shared an intimacy that felt completely foreign to me. I had never seen that side of Julia before. Before I could even process what I was seeing, Julia's eyes met mine. The smile faded from her face, replaced by an expression I couldn't quite decipher. It wasn't guilt. It wasn't shock. It was almost pity. She quickly stood up, walking toward me with a hesitant step. Ethan didn't move at all, his gaze still fixed on me as if he were sizing up what would happen next. "Hey, what's going on?" I asked, my voice almost a whisper, trying to mask the unease that had quickly transformed into something more painful. Julia stopped in front of me, her hands wringing together. She opened her mouth, but no words came out immediately. And that's when I knew, everything I had believed, everything I thought we had, was about to shatter. Ethan stood up slowly, his expression unreadable. It wasn't the brotherly concern I had always known. It was something else, something darker. "Alex," he said, his voice cool, "we need to talk." And that was the moment I realized, this wasn't just about me anymore. Something had changed. Something had broken. And the love I thought was unshakable was now teetering on the edge of destruction. But the twist? I had no idea just how deep the betrayal ran. I felt a chill creep up my spine as the silence hung between us. Julia and Ethan didn't speak at first, their eyes locked onto me, waiting. My mind raced, desperately trying to find any logical explanation for what I had just witnessed. This couldn't be happening. This had to be some sort of misunderstanding. "Alex," Julia finally spoke, her voice soft and tremulous. She took a step toward me, but I instinctively took a step back. Something about her presence felt off. "I need you to listen." I wanted to scream at her, demand answers right away, but I held myself back. I couldn't let this anger control me. I had to know the truth. I looked at Ethan, who stood with his arms crossed, his face expressionless. "What the hell is going on, Julia?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. My chest felt tight, my breathing shallow, as if the walls around me were closing in. She paused, her eyes glistening as if she were fighting to hold back tears. "Alex. I'm sorry. I never meant for this to happen." Those words, the apology, stung more than any harsh words she could have said. She sounded so defeated, as though she knew she had already lost me. I couldn't process it. Julia wasn't just apologizing for a simple mistake. This felt deeper, more complicated. Meant for what to happen? I asked, my voice growing sharp. "What's going on, Julia? What's this about?" She swallowed, clearly struggling to speak. I've been seeing Ethan." Her eyes dropped to the floor, unable to meet mine. 4 months now. I felt the floor beneath me shift, as though the very foundation of my world was crumbling away. "What?" The word came out as a whisper, disbelief echoing in my mind. "How long? How could you?" "Longer than I can bear to admit," she said, choking on the words. "I didn't want to hurt you. I never meant for it to get this far." I turned toward Ethan, my brother, who had been silent this entire time. His face remained impassive, almost cold. There was no remorse, no apology in his eyes. Just an unsettling calmness. "Ethan," I growled, my hands trembling at my sides. "You're my brother. How could you do this to me? To us?" He didn't flinch at the anger in my voice. Instead, he shrugged nonchalantly. "I didn't plan for any of this, Alex. It just happened." Just happened? That was his excuse? My heart raced, a mix of fury and betrayal clouding my thoughts. How could he say that? How could he justify this? Why? I demanded, my voice barely holding together. Why her, Ethan? Why Julia? He met my gaze steadily, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of something deeper than indifference, something dark. It was almost pity, but not for me. He wasn't sorry. Not for what he had done, but perhaps for what was about to happen. "Because I can," he said, his voice low, measured. "Because I've always been able to have whatever I wanted. And Julia, she's not just any woman. She's something different." I felt my blood boil at his words. The casual arrogance in his voice made me want to explode. But even through the anger, something deeper stirred in me, a gnawing suspicion. I had known Ethan's manipulative side for years, but this felt different. This wasn't just about power or desire. "You're not the only one who can have what they want, Ethan," I spat, trying to hold on to my composure. "But this is beyond messed up." Julia's voice broke through the tension. "Please, Alex, let me explain." I didn't want to hear any more. I didn't want to hear excuses. But despite the rage swirling inside me, a part of me still craved the full truth. What had led to this? Julia continued, her voice barely audible. I didn't know it would happen, but I've been caught up in something I can't control. Ethan, he's different. The way he talks, the way he makes me feel. He made me feel seen in ways I didn't even know I was missing. My mind reeled at her words. She wasn't just admitting to an affair, she was justifying it. She wasn't sorry. It was as if she had been drawn into some kind of magnetic force that had taken over her. Ethan stepped forward then, his voice cold and unyielding. This isn't about you anymore, Alex. This was never about you. This is about power. About control. About getting what we want when we want it. You've always been the nice guy, but nice guys finish last. His words cut deep, sharper than any blade. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. This wasn't just an affair. This was a game to them, a power struggle in which I had been nothing more than an obstacle, a pawn to be pushed aside. But the most crushing part wasn't just their betrayal. It was the way Ethan looked at me, like I was the one who had failed, like I was the one who didn't understand the rules of this game. As my world seemed to shatter around me, I noticed something I hadn't before. Ethan wasn't just smug. There was something else in his eyes. Something I couldn't put my finger on, until I did. You think this is about you, don't you? Ethan's voice dropped, suddenly serious. This isn't about me wanting your wife. It's about something much bigger. Much deeper. The words hung in the air, and for the first time, I wondered just how far the betrayal had really gone. This was no ordinary affair. And what Ethan had just hinted at was far more than I could have ever imagined. My heart pounded in my chest as Ethan's cryptic words sank in. What do you mean, Ethan? I asked, my voice shaky, betraying the anxiety twisting in my stomach. What's bigger than this? What's deeper? Ethan didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked at Julia. There was a strange understanding between them, a silent communication that left me feeling more like an outsider than ever before. Julia's eyes avoided mine, but I saw a flicker of something, regret? No. It was something else entirely. It was as if she were no longer trying to hide the truth. A cold realization dawned on me. Julia, the woman I had loved, the woman I had trusted, was complicit in this. The tension between us was suffocating, and it was in that moment, surrounded by the ghosts of my shattered marriage and family, that I felt the first real stirrings of betrayal from my own flesh and blood. Ethan stepped closer to me, his voice now low and deliberate. You've been so focused on your own little world, Alex. On your little life and career, your little family. But you've never really asked the right questions. His eyes gleamed with something dark, something that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. My pulse quickened. What are you talking about? He smirked, almost amused by my confusion. The truth, Alex. The truth about you. His voice softened into something almost menacing. You're the one who's been blind. The one who never understood what was really happening. I stood there, reeling, struggling to keep my balance as his words began to chip away at my foundation. What the hell does that mean? What's been happening, Ethan? My fists clenched at my sides, my mind racing through every moment I had spent with Julia, with my family, trying to find the cracks, the hidden secrets. But nothing seemed to make sense anymore. I told you, Ethan said, his tone sharpening. This is bigger than you, bigger than your petty little life. You've never asked the right questions because you've never wanted to know the answer. You've lived in a bubble, Alex. A bubble that kept you safe from the truth. I looked at Julia, desperate for some kind of explanation, but she didn't speak. She stood there, her face pale, as though she were watching a train wreck she had set in motion. What truth? I demanded, feeling a sense of dread begin to churn in my stomach. My mind was spinning, and yet I couldn't piece it all together. Ethan's words felt like a puzzle I couldn't solve. Ethan took a deep breath, as though preparing to finally reveal something he had been holding back for far too long. Do you remember when you first met Julia, Alex? Do you remember what she told you about her past? His eyes bore into me as if I were supposed to recall some hidden detail. I nodded slowly, my confusion deepening. She told me she came from a modest background. That her parents were middle class, that she worked hard for everything she had. I could feel the weight of the words on my tongue, the naivety in them. I had believed every single one. Ethan's smile grew darker. And you believed her. You believed her because it was easier that way. But the truth is, Julia isn't who you think she is. She's not just a woman from a humble past. He took a step closer, his voice almost a whisper now. She's connected, Alex. Far more connected than you'll ever understand. I felt the blood drain from my face. What the hell are you talking about? Julia's face hardened at Ethan's words, and for the first time since this whole conversation started, I saw something in her eyes, defiance. I never meant for you to find out this way, she said, her voice trembling slightly. But it's time, Alex. It's time for you to know. What do you mean, time? My voice cracked with frustration. What's going on? Why didn't you tell me? Julia took a deep breath, and when she spoke again, her words cut through the air like a knife. I'm not just some random woman you married, Alex. I didn't come from a modest background like I told you. I'm not just some girl from the suburbs. Her eyes locked onto mine, and for the first time, there was no fear in them. I'm part of something bigger than you, something I never had the choice to walk away from. My mind raced, trying to catch up with what she was saying. What are you talking about? Ethan stepped forward again, his voice now carrying an ominous weight. Julia's family, her real family, has ties to some very powerful people. You've been living in your little world, thinking you've got it all figured out, but you're just a pawn in a much larger game. He looked at me with disdain, as if I were the one who had failed to see the obvious. I took a step back, my head spinning. No. This doesn't make sense. Julia, you. I've always had to play a part, Alex, Julia interrupted. I never had the freedom you think I did. My family, they've controlled my every move. And when I met you, I thought maybe I could escape it, start over with you. But they found me. They found us. Your family. I could barely process the words. What are you talking about? Julia closed her eyes briefly, then opened them again, her gaze resolute. I was never free, Alex. And neither were you. Not really. The weight of her words hung in the air like a shroud, suffocating me. Ethan's smile never wavered. The question, Alex, is what you'll do now. Now that you know. The game is bigger than your marriage. It's bigger than anything you've ever known. As the pieces began to fall into place, I realized just how much I didn't know, about Julia, about Ethan, about everything. The betrayal wasn't just personal. It was something far more dangerous, far more insidious than I could have ever imagined. My mind was a mess. Julia, my wife, the woman I had married with all my trust, was not who I thought she was. Ethan, my brother, whom I had always seen as a confidant and the one person I could always count on, was now my betrayer. The cold realization hit me hard. This was no longer just about infidelity, it was about power, manipulation, and secrets I had never been privy to. Julia and Ethan had known something I hadn't. They had been playing a game far beyond my comprehension, and I was nothing more than a pawn caught in their web. But what did it all mean? Why would Julia, who had once claimed she wanted nothing more than a simple life with me, be involved in something so dark? Ethan watched me closely, clearly enjoying the confusion that clouded my every thought. He leaned back, his posture oozing casual dominance, the man who always got what he wanted. You're probably wondering how far this really goes, Alex, Ethan said with a gleam in his eye. How deep the rabbit hole really is. I couldn't find my voice. My throat felt dry, my words trapped somewhere deep inside me. I had trusted Ethan more than anyone, and now the betrayal stung like 1,000 needles. Julia stepped forward again, her eyes filled with something I couldn't name. I didn't want it to be this way, she whispered. But the truth is, Alex, my family isn't just wealthy. They are part of a network. A powerful network that controls everything. And I was always part of it. Why didn't you tell me? I finally found my voice, and my words came out in a rush. Why didn't you tell me any of this? She closed her eyes for a moment, almost as if she were retreating into herself. I wanted to protect you, Alex. From the truth. From the danger. She paused, and I could see the vulnerability in her eyes that had once drawn me to her. But it was fleeting, replaced again by the distant, hard expression that had become her reality. But I couldn't protect you anymore. Not after it started. It started? What was she talking about? My stomach churned. Was this some kind of elaborate plan? A scheme that I had walked right into, completely unaware? Ethan leaned forward, his voice now carrying an almost sinister edge. It was never just about us, Alex. It was about you all along. You were the key. Key to what? I asked, my voice cracking slightly, the fear finally starting to seep into my words. To everything. Ethan's smile was cold, calculating. You were never meant to know the full truth. But now, you will. You see, Julia's family controls information. Media, finance, politics, they pull the strings. They've been waiting for the right moment, and now that you're here, you've become part of their game. I shook my head in disbelief. This doesn't make sense. Why me? Why my life? The questions spilled from my lips without any real sense of direction. I felt like I was drowning in a sea of secrets that were so deep, I couldn't even touch the surface. You were the perfect candidate, Ethan said. You were naive. Perfect for the life they wanted to build. And you were always going to be a stepping stone. They wanted someone like you, someone who was a blank slate, someone who could be molded. And when they found Julia. He glanced at her, and she looked away. She was always meant to bring you in. The revelation was too much to process. Everything I thought I knew about my life, my marriage, was now a lie. The foundation I had built everything on was made of sand, and it was all crumbling beneath me. Julia took a step closer, her voice barely a whisper. You weren't supposed to be part of this, Alex. But you kept pushing. You kept digging, asking questions about things that didn't concern you. She sighed, looking down at her hands, almost as though she were ashamed. I thought I could keep you safe. But they never let go. They? I asked, my voice trembling with the weight of what I was hearing. Julia met my eyes then, and I saw the depth of her conflict. The people I'm involved with. They don't let anyone get too close, Alex. Not even me. Not anymore. I took a step back, feeling the reality of the situation settle in my chest like a heavy stone. I was a part of something far bigger than I could have ever imagined. And now, there was no going back. What now? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. I wasn't sure if I wanted the answer, but I needed it. I needed to understand the path that had been laid before me, whether I was ready for it or not. Ethan's gaze hardened, his smile returning, cold and unfeeling. Now, it's your choice, Alex. You can keep fighting, keep asking questions, and end up like everyone else who tried to expose the truth. Or, you can accept it. You can accept that this is the life you were always meant to have. Your move. The coldness in his voice, the way he presented it all like a game of chess, made me want to scream. But what could I do? Julia, the woman I loved, was caught in this, and now it was clear that I had been too. There was no turning back now. And as Ethan's words echoed in my head, I realized the true depth of the betrayal, not just from my wife and brother, but from a system far beyond my understanding. I was trapped. My life was no longer my own. The twist? It wasn't just Julia and Ethan who had been playing a game. It was me. And now, I was about to make a choice that would either seal my fate or destroy me completely. The room seemed to close in on me. The words, the revelations, everything started to blur together into an oppressive fog. I wanted to scream, to run, to escape this nightmare, but there was no way out. Not anymore. Julia stood there, her eyes searching mine for some sign that I would understand, that I would forgive her for what she had done. Ethan, on the other hand, looked like he had won. His posture was relaxed, his grin still plastered across his face as though everything had gone according to plan. But I wasn't so sure anymore. I wasn't sure what he had planned, but I was certain that it wasn't just about me and Julia. It was something bigger. It always had been. You think this is a game, don't you? I asked, my voice low and steady despite the storm brewing inside me. I wanted to keep my composure, to stay calm, but my emotions were threatening to explode. You think you can just manipulate everyone like this and get away with it? Ethan's eyes narrowed, and for the first time in the conversation, I saw a flicker of something other than arrogance. It's not manipulation, Alex. It's survival. You think any of us had a choice in this? Julia didn't choose this life. She didn't choose any of it. And neither did I. I glanced at Julia, who seemed to shrink into herself, her eyes avoiding mine. The woman I had once trusted, the woman I had shared everything with, was now nothing more than a pawn in a much larger game. Her silence spoke volumes, and I felt my anger begin to rise. But you did choose it, I spat. You chose to betray me. You chose to destroy everything we had for this twisted game you've all been playing. Julia's voice faltered as she spoke. I never wanted to hurt you, Alex. I didn't think it would go this far. But you kept pushing, and I was already in too deep. You don't understand, you never did. I wanted to lash out, to shout, to break everything around me, but something in her voice made me pause. There was a brokenness in her words, a realization that this wasn't entirely her fault. She had been trapped too. Just like me. But what did that even mean anymore? How could I trust anything she said? So, what now? I asked, forcing the words out. Now that you've got me where you want me, what's next? What's the plan? Ethan looked at me with a cool detachment. Now, you get to choose, Alex. You can walk away and live in ignorance, pretending none of this ever happened. Or you can join us. You can be part of the system, part of something that's bigger than you could ever imagine. You'll have power, influence, everything you've ever wanted. All you have to do is accept it. I felt my heart race at his words. Power. Influence. Everything I had ever wanted. It sounded tempting, more tempting than I wanted to admit. But the cost was clear, my soul. My integrity. Everything I had once stood for. Why would I ever choose that? I asked, shaking my head. Why would I become part of the very thing that destroyed everything I believed in? Julia's eyes filled with tears, and for a brief moment, I saw the woman I had fallen in love with. The woman who had once held my hand, smiled at me with genuine affection, and shared her hopes and dreams for the future. That woman was still in there, somewhere. But she was buried under the weight of all the lies and manipulations. I never wanted you to choose it, Alex, she whispered, her voice breaking. I wanted to protect you. I wanted to keep you safe from all of this. But I can't protect you anymore. I can't protect myself anymore. The finality in her voice hit me like a punch to the gut. The realization that I had lost her forever, that we were both trapped in this nightmare, was almost more than I could bear. She was right. She couldn't protect me. She couldn't protect herself. I turned away, pacing the room, trying to make sense of it all. But nothing made sense. I had been living a lie, and now, it was too late. I had been caught in the crossfire of something I didn't understand, something far beyond my control. Alex, Ethan's voice interrupted my thoughts, this is your chance. You can be more than just the guy who works in tech, who lives a simple life with his wife. You can have everything you've ever dreamed of. All you have to do is join us. I stopped pacing and turned to face him. Join you? I said with a bitter laugh. You really think that's what I want? To become just another puppet in your game? To be part of the system that you've created, to live a life of lies and manipulation? No. I won't be a part of this. Ethan didn't flinch. He just looked at me, as if he had been expecting this response all along. Then you'll lose everything, he said simply. You'll lose Julia. You'll lose your place in the world. You'll be nothing. A part of me wanted to believe him, to think that maybe joining them was the only way to survive. But another part of me, the part that still clung to the person I used to be, rejected that idea completely. I didn't want to be like them. I didn't want to be consumed by power and control. I didn't want to be a part of the darkness they had created. I'd rather lose everything than become what you are, I said, my voice steady despite the chaos inside me. The room fell silent, and for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt a sense of clarity. Whatever happened next, I wasn't going to let them win. I wasn't going to let Ethan and Julia drag me into their world. But as I stood there, ready to make my decision, I realized something shocking. There was more to this story than I had ever known. And the choice I was about to make would send me down a path I couldn't come back from. The silence in the room felt suffocating. My decision was made, but the weight of it pressed down on me harder than I expected. I thought I had come to terms with the truth, but now, standing there facing my wife, my brother, my own flesh and blood, I realized just how deep the betrayal ran. Ethan's face remained impassive, but there was something in his eyes that made my skin crawl. It wasn't anger or frustration, as I had expected. It was almost pity. He looked at me like I was a child, someone who simply didn't understand the rules of the game. You think you're going to walk away from this unscathed, Alex? He asked, his voice cold, laced with amusement. You can't just reject us. You can't just say no and expect everything to go back to normal. I stood tall, meeting his gaze without flinching. You can try to intimidate me all you want, Ethan. But I won't play your game. I won't become part of whatever this is. Julia's gaze flickered to the floor, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of remorse in her eyes. But it was too little, too late. Her betrayal was final, and no amount of regret would undo the damage that had been done. You're making a mistake, Alex, Julia said softly, her voice shaking with the weight of her own emotions. You think this is just about power and control, but it's not. It's about survival. We're all trapped in this, Alex. Even you. Even me. It's bigger than you understand. I shook my head. I don't care about your twisted survival tactics, Julia. This isn't survival. It's a betrayal. It's a game you two have been playing, and I won't be a part of it. Ethan stepped forward, his tone suddenly turning dangerous. You think walking away is that easy? You think you can just wash your hands of this and pretend like you didn't know everything? Like you didn't know what you were getting into? I took a step back, my heart pounding in my chest. There was something about his voice, something dark and final, that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. You're not leaving, Ethan said, his words hanging heavy in the air. Not yet. The coldness in his voice, the finality of his words, made my heart skip a beat. I could see now, with horrifying clarity, that there were consequences to my defiance. Ethan wasn't going to let me go. Not without a fight. "I'll do whatever it takes to protect what's mine," he said. "And you're not going to take Julia from me, Alex. Not now, not ever." I felt a wave of panic rise in my chest, but I refused to let it consume me. I couldn't let Ethan intimidate me anymore. He had already taken everything from me, my trust, my sense of security, my marriage. I wouldn't let him take my resolve, too. "Go ahead," I said, my voice steady, though my heart was racing. "Do your worst, Ethan. You won't break me." For a moment, it seemed like Ethan was going to strike out, to say something that would send everything spiraling further into chaos. But instead, he paused. His eyes flickered with something I couldn't quite place, something that looked almost surprised. Like he hadn't expected me to stand my ground. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be, Alex," he said quietly. "You could have everything you've ever wanted. All you had to do was join us. And lose myself in the process?" I shot back. "I'd rather live a life of pain and truth than be a puppet in your little game." The room was still, heavy with the weight of our words. I knew that there was no going back now. The finality of it settled in my chest like a heavy stone. Ethan and Julia, once the people I loved most in the world, were now my enemies. There was no reconciliation. No fixing this. Julia spoke again, her voice soft but trembling. "You have to understand, Alex, there's nothing I can do. You're already in this, whether you want to be or not." I frowned, confusion and fear starting to cloud my mind once again. "What do you mean, Julia? I'm not a part of this. Not anymore." Her eyes met mine, and for the first time, I saw the raw pain in her expression. "You are, Alex. Whether you realize it or not, you've been in this all along. You've been tied to this network since the moment you met me." Her words felt like a slap in the face. I had tried to deny it. I had told myself that if I walked away from this, I would be free. But now, she was telling me that it was never that simple. That I had always been a part of something far darker than I could ever have imagined. Ethan chuckled darkly, the sound low and unsettling. "You thought you could escape this life, Alex. You thought you could walk away. But you're not the first to try, and you won't be the last. People like us don't get to walk away. You think you're some kind of hero, standing up to the system, but all you're doing is playing into it. This is how the game works." I felt my knees go weak, but I stood tall. I wouldn't give him the satisfaction of seeing me falter. "Then I'll play by my own rules. And when I'm done, you won't have anything left." Julia's face paled, and for a fleeting moment, I saw a look of fear pass through her eyes. But she didn't speak. She just stood there, trapped in her own web of lies and manipulation. The room was silent once again. I could feel the weight of the decision I had made, the cost of my defiance. Whatever came next, whatever happened to me, I knew there was no turning back. And then, in the silence, something unexpected happened. Something that shook me to my core. Julia looked at me, her voice a whisper, and I could barely believe what I was hearing. "I never wanted any of this, Alex," she said, her voice barely audible. "But now I don't know how to get out." It was the final piece of the puzzle. The realization that even Julia was caught in something far beyond her control. She had been trapped too. Trapped in the same game that had consumed me. But as the truth sank in, I realized something even more horrifying: the game was far from over. And my role in it had only just begun. The weight of Julia's words hung in the air like an anchor, pulling me deeper into a reality I didn't want to accept. She didn't want any of this. She had been trapped just like I had. Her voice trembled as she spoke, and I saw it, the real struggle inside her, the silent plea for escape. It wasn't enough to undo the damage, but it was enough to make me question everything I thought I knew. "I never wanted any of this, Alex," she whispered again, her voice cracking. I thought I could escape, that we could escape, but now it's too late. Her admission rattled me, the final crack in the wall I had put up around myself. For so long, I had blamed her, blaming her for everything that had gone wrong, for the lies, the betrayal. But now, standing here, I understood. Julia wasn't just a villain in this story. She was a victim, a pawn in a much larger, more dangerous game. I felt something shift within me. The anger that had consumed me started to dissipate, replaced by a cold understanding. Ethan had manipulated us both. He had played on our fears, our weaknesses, and used them to his advantage. But now, I realized, there was more at stake than just the three of us. There were forces at play that I couldn't even begin to comprehend. I looked at Julia, her face pale and stricken with guilt, and I felt an unfamiliar pang of sympathy. She had been complicit, yes, but so had I. We had both allowed ourselves to be manipulated, both allowed Ethan to control the narrative. And now, there was no turning back. What do we do now? I asked, the question hanging between us like a loaded gun. I wasn't sure if I was asking Julia or myself. Ethan chuckled from behind me, breaking the silence. His voice was low, almost mocking. Now, you're going to realize just how far gone you really are. I turned to face him, my body tense with the anger that was threatening to resurface. But this time, I wasn't going to let him control me. I wasn't going to let him drag me deeper into his web. What do you mean, Ethan? I asked, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. Ethan's smile was almost predatory. He knew something I didn't, and the uncertainty gnawed at me like a hungry animal. You're already in it, Alex, he said softly. You always have been. I felt a chill run down my spine. What do you mean? Ethan stepped closer, his eyes gleaming with a dangerous light. You think this is about Julia and me, about some affair or betrayal. But that's just the surface. You've been tied to this network from the moment you met Julia. Your life, your career, your future, it was all part of the plan. My heart skipped a beat as the weight of his words sank in. My entire life, everything I thought was mine, was part of a larger scheme? This wasn't just about my marriage falling apart. This was about something much bigger, something far more sinister than I could have ever imagined. You were never supposed to be in control, Alex, Ethan continued, his voice now cold and ruthless. You were just a tool. A means to an end. And now that you've figured it out, there's no way out. No escaping. I swallowed hard, trying to keep my composure. You've been playing me this whole time, haven't you? Ethan's smile widened. Not just you, Alex. All of us. We're all players in this game. The difference is, you've just started to see the truth. And that's the most dangerous thing of all. My mind was reeling, trying to make sense of everything. But no matter how hard I tried, nothing made sense. What kind of game was he talking about? What was the point of all of this? What did he want from me? Julia's voice broke through my thoughts, quiet but firm. Alex, you don't have to listen to him. He's trying to control everything. He's always been like this. But there's still time. We can still get out. I shook my head, the fog of confusion beginning to clear. You don't understand, Julia. There's no getting out of this. Not anymore. Ethan's laugh was sharp and bitter. You still think there's an out, don't you? You think you can walk away from all of this and live your life like you did before? That's what makes you weak, Alex. That's why you'll never win. You've been living in a fantasy, and now reality is knocking on your door. There's no going back. The finality in his words was suffocating. I could feel the walls closing in around me, and the weight of the decision ahead of me was unbearable. I had two choices: I could accept what Ethan was offering, join the network, and live a life of power and influence, or I could continue to fight, knowing that it would come at a cost. Julia's gaze was fixed on me, her eyes filled with something I couldn't quite place, hope, desperation, or maybe both. "I don't want to live this way anymore, Alex. I don't want to be part of this world. But I don't know how to leave it." I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. I could see the pain in her eyes, the same pain that was gnawing at me. She didn't want this. She hadn't chosen it. And yet, here we were, trapped by forces neither of us fully understood. But as I stood there, caught between the two of them, I realized something that made my blood run cold. The game wasn't just about power. It was about control. And Ethan had controlled everything from the very beginning. "I'm not going to play by your rules anymore, Ethan," I said, my voice steady, though my hands were shaking. "And neither is Julia." Ethan's smile faltered for just a moment, but it was enough to tell me that he wasn't expecting that response. For the first time, he seemed rattled. "I don't think you understand, Alex," he said slowly, his voice low and dangerous. "You don't have a choice. You're already in this. And when you're in, there's no way out." But as his words hung in the air, I realized something even more terrifying. Maybe I didn't have a choice. Maybe there was no way out. But I would fight for my freedom anyway. Even if it cost me everything. Even if it cost me Julia.